Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey guys, I just wanted to document this moment. OG XBox Backwards Compatibility is finally here. Granted, only 13 titles at this point, but I really wanted to, I just wanted to have footage of this, because this is something, obviously, I've been wanting for a really long time. And there we go. It displays. Install disk. And we'll let it... For this game, you need to download an update. Yes, which we all know it works very similar to the way the 360 does. But still, look at that. It's installing. That's awesome. So this is really great, guys. So if you haven't heard, if you don't know, it's time. OG XBox Backwards Compatibility. There's 13 games out now, and presumably more will be coming. So go ahead and look into that. This is a fucking awesome day, man. This is just awesome for original Xbox fans. So I've got all of them installing now, all 13 of them. See, they're all queued there. We got Black, we've got Bloodrayne 2, Crimson Skies, some that aren't displaying, even though they should. King of Fighters Neowave, Red Faction 2, Sid Meier's Pirates, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Ninja Gaiden Black. But yeah, again, the full list is online, but I've got them all running right now. This is just really cool. This is just really cool. I know a lot of people argue, oh, it's totally pointless, who gives a shit, but like, to me, this is awesome. The fact that they gave this to you. This costs absolutely nothing, too, because I have all the original discs. You can just put in the original discs, and they'll work, which is awesome. Or if you don't have them, you can download them off the store. This is, I just think this is neat. You guys who've been watching me for a while know that this is something I tried really hard to push at the few chances I ever got. I met with Major Nelson once, Chris Charlo once, and I both pushed it on them, see if this would ever happen. And it's awesome that this actually is coming to fruition. So there you go, guys. Enjoy.
So as those clips would indicate, obviously I felt the need to talk about the original Xbox backwards compatibility program on the Xbox One. I was super excited about it, man. Like, I posted those videos, those little clips you saw before, and I started talking about it a lot on Twitter and Facebook, and people just kept asking me like a ton of questions. So I thought, you know what, let's just do a whole video, let's talk about it. So if you're watching this the day it came out, yesterday Microsoft released the first wave of titles compatible with the OG Xbox on the Xbox One, which is insane to think that they're basically retroactively doing that. So I want, before we go through the games, and we will do that, I just kind of want to talk about some of the basic questions I noticed people kept asking. First, does it play everything? No, it does not. There's almost 1,000 games that exist on the original Xbox. Currently, it only plays 13 of them. I know that sounds small, but let's analyze why that is. I'm not defending this, I'm just explaining it. So, in the past, consoles like, say, the Atari 7800 was able to play all the Atari 2600 games, or the PlayStation 2 was able to play all the PlayStation 1 games. Why was that when modern backwards compatibility like the Xbox One only plays select 360 games or even more select original Xbox games? Well, the difference is the way it works. In older consoles, what they would essentially do is build the hardware straight in, and then the only medium was the disc. There was no way to charge you essentially a licensing fee to play it on another generation of hardware. So that's just basically how it would play it. They weren't reselling you the games, they were just selling you new hardware. In the case of the Xbox One, now it doesn't have the capacity to play an original Xbox disc. It can't do that. It can't play an Xbox 360 disc. Hell, it can't even play its own discs. All three of them, what it does is it takes the game, it detects what it is, and in the case of the Xbox One regular discs, it downloads, it basically copies all of the data off the disc, puts it on a hard drive, and you play it off that, then use the disc as a CD unlock key. With the Xbox 360 and original Xbox, it detects those discs, checks the internet, and then says like, okay, is that game compatible? It is. Okay, let me go ahead and grab a build of that game, put it on your hard drive, and now you have the game on your hard drive, but the disc is required to unlock the data on the hard drive. They built it that way because A, they couldn't really rely on the disc itself. Even though I am all about physical media, and I love the idea of being able to just pop my original disc in and having it just play off the disc, I can see why they didn't want to bank on having that system entirely run off of 15-year-old discs. I take good care of my stuff. I don't represent everybody. You don't represent everybody. A bunch of us who would be watching this are the kind of people who do take care of their stuff, but the majority of people don't. Plus, there's no money in that because they already sold you those games. So the idea was make a digital backup. Make a digital version that they could control. Basically what they do is take the game and they make an Xbox One build of it. They run it through an emulator, of course. I'm not saying they go into the source code and start the whole game over for Xbox One. That would be absurd. It is the original Xbox version, but being more isolated, they can basically make tweaks to it on an individual basis. And then they have built one file they know works, and then when you put your disc in, it downloads said game file, basically. That allows certain pluses and minuses. The minus is obvious. You don't actually have the game I put in isn't actually going to play off the disc. It'll just detect it. So in the future, when the servers are down and all that stuff, if I don't have the game already installed on my hard drive, even though it was made compatible at some point, it's not going to work anymore. If the game's still on the hard drive and the hard drive still works and the console still works and all that, then it'll work until one of those things breaks, but you are ultimately at the mercy of a server. Because they have a digital backup, the alternate way to do this is you don't have to have the original discs. They can allow you to basically rebuy a digital version of the game. By rebuying a digital version of the game, they can potentially make some money on this program, which I'm sure is definitely part of the point, in addition to just marketing the fact that they have this, when one of their competitors doesn't, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But because they're essentially reselling digital versions of these games, Microsoft doesn't own all of these games. They don't own every game that was around the original Xbox. In fact, they don't own the vast majority of them. So whoever does own them has to make some money off of it. In some cases, that's easy. Some of the companies still exist. Other companies do not. So a lot of their games are lost into the ether, and who actually owns them is a mystery. Microsoft probably won't go after those, but they'll go after the easier ones. They're going to go after the games made by companies that are still around that are in higher demand. That's logical because that's one of the ones where they think they can make more money on. Hence we have these first 13. But yeah, because they're reselling it, you have to have the company's permission. That's basically how it works. As opposed to being able to just build a flat emulator that just ran the disk straight, which would be nice, but I could see why they didn't do that. So that's that. Now, to people who would complain about that program, I will say, yes, it sucks that you don't get all the games, but I will say, alternatively, it could be worse. People forget that Sony has had a very similar program to this for quite some time. For quite a while now, you've been able to play PS1 and PS2 games in limited quantities such as this on your PlayStation 4. And for a long time, people were very falsely calling it backwards compatibility, which is fucking horseshit. It's not backwards compatibility. You know why? Because you can't use your disc. Yes, Sony has the same program, but the difference is if you have the PlayStation 2 original disc of a game that is compatible with the PS4, you put the disc in, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't support that. They force you to rebuy it digitally. Microsoft, at least, I gotta give them credit, they're giving you the option. They're like, you want to rebuy it digitally because you don't have the disc anymore, you can do that, or if you have the disc, tell you what, that's gonna work too. Credit where credit's due, man. That was cool of them to do. So now let's talk about benefits of this. Most original Xbox games ran in either 480i or 480p. There were some exceptions that ran in 720p and in widescreen natively. One of these games in particular is one of those. But because they ran it through an emulator, it was kind of funny, man. When they first announced this, they really underplayed it. And they definitely did that on purpose. They said, like, it's happening, but really there's only like 2 games that are going to support it, at least for a while. And it's really just going to be an emulator. It's not going to really do anything. They're going to pretty much look exactly the way they did originally. Clearly that was some sort of marketing ploy because I think they recognized if they launched this program and said like, oh yeah, Xbox backwards compatibility is going to be this big thing, and they only started with 13 games, people would be really pissed off. But since they kept saying like, oh yeah, it's not going to be that big of a deal for us, we don't really care that much, it's not going to be that great, they kept saying it that way. That way we're all kind of pleasantly surprised, and I know I am. I mean, it worked. Like, when I expected 2 games and I expected no additional benefits to any of the games, then we get 13 and there are a bunch of benefits, I gotta say, that's a nice little bonus. So what are those benefits? Like I said, the games originally ran in smaller resolutions. It turns out now, they built the emulators so that if you use it on Xbox One S, as opposed to the original Xbox One, I think those two run at about the same resolution, although I heard rumor that the Xbox One S does actually support a higher resolution than the Xbox One basic model. Basically, they'll run it like 4 times the original resolution. So they run native at something like 960p, kind of an odd resolution, and they upscale to 1080p. Native. And they're not upscaling from the original 40i or 40p. They're running native at that because they're re-rendering it, which is fucking impressive. And the Xbox One X, when it comes out, is going to support these. It's going to run them at a substantially higher resolution, like something like 16 times the original resolution. So direct comparisons show that these games look a lot fucking better. They also have some significantly reduced load times, and they also have much more improved frame rates in general. So it is a much better original Xbox gaming experience in general, which is very, very cool. So again, credit where credit's due. I'm very curious to see how they will ultimately look on an Xbox One X whenever I hopefully get one. So I think the other thing that I found very interesting about this is that all 13 of these games were made compatible with the Xbox 360. Now that could say multiple things, and it could also say nothing. It could just be a coincidence, which would be it saying nothing. But it is also possible, and a lot of people speculated, oh, it's because they must have used whatever emulator they wrote for the 360, they're now using the Xbox 360 backwards compatibility on Xbox One, and like hat on a hat. I'm like, no, they wouldn't be fucking retarded. They're not going to do it that way. That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. They would not do it that way. They built an original Xbox emulator from the ground up for the Xbox One. You wouldn't do it that way. It's just illogical. But I think what it more so has to do with was they ran into a very similar licensing issue back in the day with the original Xbox on Xbox 360. But at the same time, with the original Xbox on 360, they also, not always of course, they tended to favor games they thought were simply better or easier to bring over. That might have been more of the logic. They looked at ones that they thought they could possibly make some money on, ones that maybe some company wanted to test a franchise with, companies that still exist. There's a whole bunch of factors, but in the end, they ended up picking 13 of the already pre-supported titles. Now, there are plenty of quality games on the original Xbox that were never made compatible with the 360, and some of which were made by Microsoft. So, you know, who knows? We don't know. But at the moment, about half of them were made compatible with the 360. So there's a very big chance that some of them that weren't will be made compatible. I wouldn't say that you have to limit it to just the ones that were made 360 compatible. I don't think that's a rule. I think that's more of a coincidence at this point. But it's hard to say because, unfortunately, as great as Microsoft did on this, it seems like it's really not a high priority for them. They made that clear multiple times. In fact, they already told us when the next update comes out, meaning the next wave of titles. It's not until spring of 2018. That's a little while away. And if we're to assume they're going to do around the same amount of games in each wave, we're going to be, seriously, we're going to be lucky if even 10% of the original Xbox library is ever made compatible. So I really hope that if you got to do it that way, I hope that they basically focus on the quality titles, which I'm sure most of us do, as opposed to just reaching bigger numbers just for the sake of it. Like, I don't need all my sports games to be compatible, but what I would like is a lot of the Sega titles. Sega made some great stuff, and I'm sure Sega will cooperate, although ironically they had nothing to do with this grouping. Sega loves to do stuff like that, so I wouldn't be surprised. And I know you guys think, oh, Sega fanboy, of course, like that's what he's going to think. Sega made some of the best games in the original Xbox. It's just true. A lot of people call that thing the real Dreamcast 2. Like, that's what it was. But the fact that you had all these other big companies, which we'll go through in a minute, already on board is great. So without further ado, let's go through real quick and look at the current lineup of games and just talk about them for a bit. The first one is Black, which I showed briefly at the beginning of the video. Black is funny. I mentioned very falsely at one point that this game also had a 360 version. It did not, but ironically, it now kind of has an Xbox One version, which is funny. Oh, I should have mentioned, this one's by EA, which means EA is on board with the system, which is great. Because they have a lot of content, regardless if you like them or not. I'm not a big fan, but they do have a lot of content on there, so to know that they're on board is good. Bloodrayne 2, which is a pretty cool game. This one was released by Majesco, and I find that very fascinating because Majesco ceased to exist last year in 2016. So whoever acquired Majesco's assets must have acquired this, and that gives me some hope because Microsoft could have very easily looked at like all the games by Majesco and said, okay, cross every single one of those off the list. I don't know who has them now. I don't really care. But they actually did their homework. They went out and found out, like, no, we want Bloodrayne 2. Who has it? And they made it happen. So credit where credit's due. This is the one they showed off at E3, Crimson Sky's High Road to Revenge. Very underrated game, actually. Very fucking cheap game. I've seen this in dollar bins so many times. This game is actually made by Microsoft themselves. Originally, this game had a ton of DLC. DLC does not work. Okay, it does not allow you to do DLC stuff. It does not allow you to play any Xbox Live stuff. Will that ever be made possible? I really doubt it, but it is a possibility, I suppose. But it's funny when you like try to go to the Xbox Live section of this game, an Xbox One message will actually pop up saying like that's not supported. It is interesting. Like they really thought about all this. So hopefully stuff like that DLC content is somehow fed back into it, but we'll see. Either way, this is the one they showed at E3, and it's funny because they specifically said like, oh yeah, it'll run at like 480p. Ooh. Like they didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but now we've already seen screenshots from this running on Xbox One X, and it looks sick. It looks like something that 360 would have had, granted at a higher resolution, but it just looks impressive is all I'm saying. Dead to Rights, also a game by Namco, so Bandai Namco, they've merged since. That means all their games are potentially an option for the original Xbox Backwards Compatibility program. It also might be a nice way for them to test and see if Dead to Rights has any reason to return as a franchise, which I'm kind of speculating. I'll get more into that in a little bit, but I think that might be part of the motivation that some of these companies have. Like Bandai Namco, Dead to Rights is not an active franchise, but if they're like, well, you know what, we can resell digital versions of the old ones, this is a good way to kind of test the market a little bit. And also, for that reason, I would expect Dead to Rights 2 to very possibly be in the next wave. Fuzion Frenzy, this was the other one they had announced right from the get-go. This is also a Microsoft property, so that's not super surprising, but definitely cool. A lot of screenshots and a lot of footage of this one out there. This one looks really, really good, cleaned up. This one, I have to admit, is the one I would have changed out. Grabbed by the Ghoulies. I have nothing against this game. I actually think it's pretty cool game. It was Rare was making it when they were still owned by Nintendo. At one point, this was in development for the GameCube. When Microsoft bought them, this came with it, and it became an original Xbox exclusive, and ultimately is a Microsoft entity, which it makes sense why it would be there. It was the only game Rare made for the original Xbox, other than the Conker's Bad Fur Day remake. But I think this was a wasted opportunity because this game already exists on the Xbox One in the form of Rare Replay. So if you're gonna, I really would not have picked this one for that reason alone. I mean, it's certainly welcome to exist on the Xbox One. It's just, this would not have been anywhere near the top of choices just because it already exists there. But nevertheless, it's here. Next up, this one really shocked me. King of Fighters Neowave. SNK Playmore cooperated to make this. So that gave me a lot of hope because first of all, I had no idea that this is like such an obscure, relatively, for the original Xbox. Like how many people even knew this came out on the original Xbox? This one wasn't even released in Europe, which is interesting because this is a region-free program. So if you're in Europe and you have an Xbox One and you've always wanted this, you can buy the American version of this, bring it to Europe, put it in your European Xbox One, and it will work. So you have that option now, which is cool because there are tons of European, Japanese, and even some other like random Australian, Singaporean, I'm not sure if that's technically accurate, or South Korean as well, exclusives that possibly could get added over time. So region-free stuff is dropped, which is awesome. I played this for a while today. This was actually pretty fun, and it cleans up so well. But it gives me hope because again, SNK Playmore, like who knew that they would be on board like right from the get-go? And they put out a bunch of their infamous like Neo Geo stuff on there, so we might be seeing all that stuff on there as well. It's a great way to compete with, in my opinion, Nintendo. Because Nintendo has a massive library of stuff that they're able to just throw up on the Switch like super easily. Microsoft and Sony, more so Microsoft, don't really have that advantage. So this is a great way for Microsoft to have some sense of competition. Be like, hey look, we have a whole bunch of Neo Geo stuff too that was on the original Xbox that now is up there. I'm just throwing that out there as a potential, but it's still cool to me. Ninja Gaiden Black from Tecmo. This is actually one of the games that ran in widescreen originally. I believe it also supported, it says supports 480p on the back. So maybe this wasn't one of the 720p games, but I do know it's ran in widescreen at one point. So this game actually looks particularly impressive on the console, but that's cool. It also says that Tecmo's on board. Tecmo made, of course, the Dead or Alive games, which were some of the only games to help move original Xboxes in Japan. I mean, Dead or Alive 1, 2 were both remastered for it. Dead or Alive 3 was on there, as well as the beach volleyball first one. I would love to see at least the real fighting games appear on the Xbox One because they were fantastic. I played the shit out of them, especially, and I ultimately played the crap out of Dead or Alive 4 on the Xbox 360, Dead or Alive 5 on Xbox One. So to have those on there would be great because Tecmo's obviously in support of this program. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time by Ubisoft. This is interesting. This is essentially the precursor game to Assassin's Creed. Like this kind of spawned that franchise. And of course this means that Ubisoft is on board. Ubisoft of course is a huge fucking developer and they have tons of games that existed on there. So again, to know that they're on board means there's a whole potential wealth of games out there. It also is an interesting way for someone like Ubisoft to test the waters and see, do people want another Prince of Persia? Is that a possibility? Maybe. We'll see how the digital versions sell. This one is a little bit unique to me for two reasons. One, Psychonauts. Of course, this is an infamous game amongst gamers that didn't sell well, but people love it whenever they play it. And finally, it's getting a sequel, which is awesome. And this is, I think, a great way to advertise that sequel. Part of the reason I think this game might have been selected, other than just fan demand, might actually be like, since the sequel is coming, they can use the fact, hey, do you ever want to play the first one? Super easy way, you have an Xbox One, you can go out and download it for the Xbox One. Yes, you can buy the disc if you want to go find it on eBay or whatever, but you can download it and pay us money for that, and you can go play the original game. Just saying, it's out there as an option. And yeah, the other thing that's fascinating, this is also by Majesco, much like Bloodrayne 2. So I'm kind of thinking it was more logical was that Microsoft wanted this game for whatever reason. And whoever had the assets for this probably also had the assets for Bloodrayne 2, or the legal assets, let's put it that way. And that's where it started. I'm guessing. But either way, very cool that that was added. Another example, very similar, Red Faction 2 by THQ. THQ doesn't exist anymore. THQ Nordic exists. They're like a weird, just the name kind of recycled type of thing. I don't actually know who owns the assets of Red Faction now, but to know, again, that just because THQ is dead, it doesn't mean Microsoft crossed them off the list and moved on. They did their homework, and they found out, we want this game for whatever reason, let's make it happen. So there you go. Sid Meier's Pirates by 2K. Again, I think this is a situation where 2K wanted to make some money off of this program because I know that 2K has a long history of cooperating with Microsoft on stuff like this, but 2K, I think they had a really bad year this last year, and I don't think they had too many games on the original Xbox, but to know that they're on board is good because it means that, well, whatever they have will probably end up on there because it's an opportunity for them to make a quick buck and they can cooperate with them. So as a result, we benefit, we get Sid Meier's Pirates. And last but not least, the one that I think surprised the hell out of everyone and also gives me the biggest hope of all, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic by LucasArts, the ill-fated, no longer existing LucasArts, and BioWare. Now EA obviously now has the Star Wars license for video games, Disney being the ultimate parent owner of the franchise, but I don't think anybody really expected this game to come out here. And I remember when they first announced the program, this was the one that everyone was like, yep, I want that shit. I want Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Now, partially, it was probably that fan demand that really pushed the wheels forward. But I'm thinking this makes me happy because it means that they got, right out of the gate, they got them to cooperate. And there's so many great Star Wars games on the original Xbox, particularly Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, that I would love to see come over. So really hope that happens. The only thing that disappointed me here is that Sega wasn't involved in this project, because obviously Shenmue 2 is on there, but also a whole bunch of other great games that they put out. And I'm sure we'll see stuff like that in the next wave. So if you guys tell me, you know, what do you think? Like, which games would you like to see pop up on the original Xbox One backwards compatibility program? Will you be downloading any of these? Are you like completely averse to that? You know, because I'm curious. Like, I don't need to download it, nor would I do that because I have the original discs. That's the way I do things. But they're not making money off of me. They're making money off of people who actually buy it. So I'm curious who else is going to be financially supporting the system. Regardless, it's still a really cool feature, and I hope this cleared up any potential questions or anything you guys might have about it. Highly recommend to check it out. A lot of these games are dirt cheap still. So if you're curious what it's like, go pick one up, pop it in your Xbox One, and have fun. That's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all later.